What's good, folks? It's Nightmare Frame here with a new First Descendant video, coming at you with an in-depth look at Enzo, one of the best supports in the entire game. Now, this video was not made possible if it wasn't for one of my viewers who is a Giga Enzo main, and he provided us with a massive Google Doc with all the information that you need to know about Enzo. And because, hey, we're bad at video games, I got a little section here just for me. So I'll provide this Google Doc down in the description and pinned comment. So what does Enzo do? Enzo's all about his drones that supply support to you and teammates while dealing some passive damage. So he isn't a Descendant that's all about ability damage as much, but more focused on his supply drops and drones. Let's take a look at his abilities. Starting off with his passive. His passive is very simple. It just gives you ammo reserves for all your weapon types. At the same time, he is the only Descendant that grants you bonus rewards when you're hacking those encrypted vaults. Not only that, is that he makes hacking those encrypted vaults a lot easier. So if you're wondering why people have so much Kuiper and they're playing Enzo, well, you can see. Those encrypted vaults do help you out a lot when it comes to farming catalysts. You get those materials, and of course, your energy activators. His first skill is very simple, yet not that impressive. It just pops down a supply drone that gives ammo to the team. So if you're in a boss fight and those who are out of ammo, they don't have to run all the way to the supply unit or kill mini ads to get bonus ammo. Pop it down and pick it up. You see how it gave me bonus reserves. Simple, just like that. And this supply drone will remain on the field depending on its duration and will disappear if everyone picks up the ammo or it just runs out of duration. The second skill, very straightforward. You press the button, you throw out a rocket that deals damage. Nothing else, nothing special, nothing unique. Now, this third skill is also what makes Enzo a unique tank. He's not your ordinary tank, but a shield tank. So this drone over here attaches to Enzo and replenishes shields and continues to replenish shields until it goes away. He's able to take in so much damage as this drone is just funneling in those shields. So Enzo's able to take crazy amounts of damage and still not even die because of all the shield regeneration. I was able to take hard mode executioner at level 11 just because of how strong this one skill is. Now, his best skill is the fourth one. This is what makes him the perfect support. It's in the name. You got it. Reading the skill, you summon a drone and it attaches to Enzo and anyone nearby. This drone will continue to deal damage over time, and then finally, when it's done, it will release a massive explosion that deals AoE damage. It grants everyone in the team firearm attack. This is base damage for your weapons. It gives you crit rate on the weapons, and it makes you reload faster. Not only that, it replenishes your ammo reserves and increases it. So when I say increase it, it goes over the normal value. So let's have a look. So usually it would stop at 300, but it goes over that. You see how it's past 300? We're at 420 right now. Nice. So if we're at the enemy right now, we can activate our third skill to give us that shield drone, our fourth to give us base damage, and boom. It's dealing passive damage right now, as you can see. And then when it's finally over, you can see the duration right there. Boom. Big one. Now, Enzo has 4 skill modules here. Unfortunately, I still do not have this, so I've yet to test it. However, these 2 skill modules are his best ones. Focus fire is pretty decent, but these 2 right here are the best ones you want to have. Let's start off with supply tactical armor. So whenever Enzo buffs his allies, this is with his 4th skill, he grants himself and allies damage reduction. It says damage down. It's stupid. Damage reduction and movement speed. So this is a 15% final damage reduction to allies and a 20% movement speed. So when you equip this, it alters the passive. So right now, everybody in the team gets that 15% damage reduction and 20% movement speed. However, this does not work if you're playing solo and only works if you're in a team. So a perfect team support. His other skill module, Supply Firearm Enhancer, good for team play and solo play. This alters your first ability. So usually this will give you ammo. However, now when you pick up this buff, it grants you crit chance on your weapons and weak point damage. That's a 15% increase to your weak point damage. For those who are thinking of running a crit tamer, yes, it's possible. So for example, let's equip the Albion Cavalry. This has 7% crit chance. Ugh. So with this gun active, you can see right here, we have 7% crit rate. So let's take a look what this does. You drop this supply unit on the ground. You can drop it anywhere, but when you walk over it and pick it up, this buff is permanent until you deplete your magazine. So you can see on my boon area, and when we go to our stats, you will see that you'll have a 36% increase to our critical hit rate, and we get that 15% weak point damage. This weapon has a base of 1 times weak point damage, so that's free damage right there with just that supply unit. So we can use this weapon, and it's now going to be a crit weapon, and when we reload, that's when we lose the buff. This is great if you're using weapons that have a high magazine. Take a look at that, 219 bullets in the mag. So if you want that buff to last as long as possible, use LMGs. And lastly, the Focus Fire skill module. This alters your 4th skill. So usually you would see you'll get that firearm attack, critical hit rate, and the reload speed modifier. Unfortunately, when you activate this skill module, you'll lose those buffs. However, it grants you even more damage on your 4th skill, and you're able to maintain this buff even longer when you deal critical hits. And on top of that, it increases the max stacks of your 2nd ability. So this skill module is pretty good if you want Enzo to be a hybrid skill DPS and gun DPS at the same time. And when you use a crit weapon, you're able to maintain this buff as long as possible. So you don't have to worry about modding duration on this guy and go with something like focus on singular and increase your non-attribute damage modifiers. So something like that. So then this skill will deal a lot more damage with its turrets. So normally we deal 700 and something damage. So now with this active, we're dealing 12k. Nice. Yeah, it's a lot of damage. Not that great, but the other downside about this skill module is that your 4th skill now doesn't do its massive explosive damage when it ends. It just goes away, but it's decent for some sustained damage. So with the help of that Google Doc, and I'm pretty sure you've seen an amazing video by Glad himself, who's an Enzo main, I managed to make a build that works for me perfectly. On top of that, the first build right here, Crit plus Team, is able to run the same mods and only interchange Supply Tactical Armor and Firearm Enhancer. By just switching these 2 skill modules, the build changes. That's how simple it is. So before we get into the build, let's take a look at the reactors. Now the current reactor I'm using for my 2 builds, the Crit and Team, is a Dimension Reactor. This has the Enduring Legacy mounting, but take a look at these substats. I have skill duration and skill cooldown, which is so damn good to have. On top of that, I'm pairing it up with one of the best general rounds weapons in the entire game, the Enduring Legacy. Yes, better than your Tamer. Now looking at the substats that I rolled, I got firearm attack, rounds in the magazine, critical damage, and bonus firearm attack to Colossi. Now that firearm attack, I would highly recommend to reroll it for crit chance or a bonus element. But this is what I got and I kept it. So what's the unique thing about Enduring Legacy? So when we come over here, we're going to take a look at the stats. This weapon has a base crit chance of 20%. That is already way more than the Tamer, and a 1.7 critical damage multiplier, so it's a crit weapon. Unfortunately, it has a 1 times weak point damage multiplier. It has decent fire in it and decent base damage. And the best part is about this weapon is that it doesn't slow you down like the Tamer. If you compare this to the Tamer and the walking speed, significantly slower. Reading the unique ability, on hitting an enemy, increases status effect trigger rate corresponding to the element, Fire Chill Electric Toxin, and inflicts the unique ability Quenching to the target enemy. So on hitting a burnt enemy, so if you have fire on your weapon and you proc that heat damage, keep hitting the enemy, you grant yourself stacks of base damage. So looking at Quenching right now, the duration lasts 0.4 seconds. This is at base. I'm not sure if it increases as much, but we'll check. But the max stacks go up to 30. And the best part, it reduces the enemy's fire resistance by 5%. And the increments go up by 0.8%. And the base damage you get per stack is 7%. So at max stacks, you get a 210% increase to your base damage, while also decreasing the enemy's fire Now, I've invested a lot in this weapon, as you can see, and it hits so hard and feels so good to use. You already know the substats, so let's take a look at this build real quick. I have 3 base damage mods right here, so I'm going all out. I didn't bother to mod for any weak point damage because it's not necessarily needed. However, if you want, you could replace rifling and reinforcement for heavy aiming to give you 40% weak point damage, stack it up with Enzo's first skill augment that grants you that 15% weak point damage. Up to you, but make sure to keep mental focus here, because when you keep firing your weapon, this increases your firearm attack by 1% every time, and this could reach a max stacks of 150%. That's a 150% base damage increase. It's a lot of damage. The other options for people is running both heavy aiming and sharp precision shot. This does increase your fire rate and increases your firearm attack. So if you want to make this into a hybrid crit and weak point damage increase, you can use heavy aiming, sharp precision shot, and change one of the substats to weak point damage to further boost your damage. If you're going to go that route, I'd highly recommend changing firearm attack to weak point damage. However, this is what I went with, and as you can see, we deal a lot of damage. 3 base damage mods, crit chance here with edging shot. We do get that minus 15% firearm attack, but no worries, we have a lot of firearm attack coming from this weapon, especially paired up with its passive. So when you proc fire damage, as you can see right there, we get that bonus firearm attack. And here's another thing that people also underestimate when it comes to their DPS values: modding for elemental damage. Elemental damage is a huge boon to your DPS, especially if you have fast firing weapons that also crit. The unfortunate part about elemental damage is that it doesn't scale off weak point damage, but it scales with your base damage and crits. So elemental damage is applied as a separate instance of damage to your initial shot. So when you shoot an enemy, you'll see right there, you got that, we dealt weak point damage there as yellow number, but we also did fire damage as the white number. So you see those multiple instances, and of course you have the damage over time from the elemental damage. Below your load on enemies, you're gonna get all these crazy amounts of numbers that further increase your damage. So do not underestimate elemental damage. Continuing with the build, fire rate, super crucial to increase your damage. The faster you fire, the more damage you deal. And finally over here, we have the 2 critical damage multipliers. As you can see over here, we have a modded value of 5.1. Unfortunately, these substats are not added to your modding screen, but you can easily calculate that. And finally, magazine capacity. Having a larger magazine is, big fire rate, big magazine, blow your load very fast, and take down the enemy. Unfortunately, this mod right here is not counted towards your DPS, nor is the elemental damage mod. If we have a look over here, the 575k DPS, we remove elemental damage, remove mental focus, and you can see nothing happened to our DPS because some of these conditional damage modifiers do not contribute to your DPS number. So usually when you see people going, I have crazy amounts of DPS, well, you can't really tell because it's just a number that it's increased by your modded base damage, crit chance, fire rate, and magazine. Also, another thing that's not taken into account is weak point damage to your DPS. So if I were to replace it right now, right there, it did blink red, but we don't see any change. But this is also an increase to our damage. All right, now that we've looked at the reactor and the weapon, let's have a look at our external components. Over here, I have two-piece. I'm running the bravery set. This is the one that you get from Frostwalker, and the two-piece set gives you that HP recovery modifier and an 11% max shield increase. Now, having max HP here is pretty nice, but there's a build for Enzo that you completely neglect HP and just go full on shields, and you're left with 1 HP, but a massive shield pull. On your processor, you definitely want to have max shields because Enzo benefits more with shields thanks to his 3rd skill. Now, my 2nd set is the Annihilator set. This comes from Devourer. Now, on the sensor here, you want to have max MP and MP recovery in combat. Now, this is another important thing that was shown to me in the Google Doc, how MP recovery is actually insanely good for Enzo, especially if he wants to maintain his abilities. So max MP and MP recovery in combat. So this is nice, but I need to farm a lot more Devourer. However, I do have a god roll for my memory. It gives me defense and an MP recovery modifier. This is exactly what you want on your memory. So right now with a 2-piece, I get that 5.7% duration and that max shield and HP recovery. So this is the best combo you can go with Enzo. All right, without further ado, let's finally take a look at those Enzo builds. Starting off with the crit and support loadout. Now, this is the crit team, so all you're going to do is change the skill module, but keep the build the same. Now, I'm increasing my duration thanks to maximize duration and skill expansion. so that fourth skill lasts a bit longer. But at the same time, I'm reducing the cooldown. MP conversion, multi-talented, nimble fingers, all of these add together to give me crazy amounts of skill cooldown reduction. By the time our fourth skill is done on the field, we can cast it again. And you're going to combo it with the third skill with the dimension to trigger multi-talented, and then use the fourth skill. Now, what does multi-talented do? So when using a dimension skill, you reduce that skilled cooldown by 20%. So that means you want to cast your third ability first, which is a dimension skill, and you can snapshot that buff from multi-talented over to your fourth skill. Let's see how that works. So normally, if I cast the fourth skill, you'll see the duration lasts pretty decently, but look at that cooldown. Not that great. If I use my third skill first, and then snapshot that buff into the fourth skill, look at that cooldown reduction. You see how fast it moves? Oh yeah, multi-talented, very good to use. Now, how to tell that you've gotten multi-talented buff? Just take a look at that boon section of your abilities. That's the place you want to pay attention to, not over here. That is multi-talented right there. You see how it says cooldown reduction? During that 5-second window is when you want to cast your abilities, paired with that reactor, which gives me skill cooldown. Now, maximize conservation here reduces the skill cost, but also reduces my skill modifier. Now, the skill modifier reduction does drop my damage over time on my turret to 0. So yes, we will deal 0 damage with its consistent damage over time, but that's not an issue because that turret is just there to give me that damage buff to my weapons. And this is the first time you're seeing no HP on the build. We have increased shield and HP conversion. This reduces my HP but grants me a large shield bonus. And yes, defense does affect shields. So having a lot of defenses on your kit does reduce the damage you take to your shields, and we're easily able to replenish those shields thanks to the third skill. And that's pretty much the crit and team build. All you have to do is change the skill module. If you want to play with a team, support your team, you go with that. If you want to make your team do even more damage and crits, use this one. This is nice survivability and movement speed and for skill issued teammates, while this one is good for you and teammates who know what they're doing. Now, the focus fire build is slightly different, but it has some similarities. We do have some skill cooldown. This is mainly for the third skill because we want this ability to be up if you want some survivability. Always nice to have some cooldown reduction. I double stack defense because we're just going to be holding down the trigger and going raka-taka-taka-taka-taka-taka-taka, putting the third ability if you want some survivability and continue shooting. Of course, we have increased shields and the damage done to shield is reduced even further thanks to our defense modifiers. On top of that, this gives me a skill power modifier that affects the damage of my turrets. So I paired it up with focus on non-attribute. This gives me non-attribute skill power and reduces my cooldown, along with focus on singular, which grants me a modifier to my singular skills, which is the fourth skill, and it reduces my cooldown even further. And finally, strong mentality reduces the skill cost. We do not want to use the other one because the other one reduces our skill power modifier. So let's show you how this looks like in action. You cast the third skill, multi-talented, trigger the fourth one, and you just lay down on the trigger. And have a look at the buff duration on the left side there. As long as we crit, we're refreshing the duration. But yeah, folks, this is my Enzo loadout. And also thanks to Yam Sandwich, who helped out again with that Google Doc to help me understand Enzo a bit more. But anyway, that has been it for me. I do hope you enjoyed this video. And if you did, please feel free to leave a like, share, and subscribe for more First Descendant content, streams, and so much more. Do refer to the description. Thanks for watching. And as always, a peace. Bye-bye now.